Unregulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. I thought I was all set up there right until the music started. Cam Edwards, your host, glad to be with you today on the program. We've got some news about a phenomena that it's been going on for a couple of years. Kind of ebbs and flows. We saw a lot of movement in the Second Amendment sanctuary area long about November of last year when the state of Virginia elected a Democrat-controlled legislative majority, and as a result, dozens of counties and towns, more than 100 of them across the state of Virginia, passing the Second Amendment sanctuary resolutions. That prompted a flurry of activity in other states like Kentucky, even New York State. And then the coronavirus hit. And, you know, it kind of put a stop to a lot of things, including a lot of county commission meetings, city council meetings. Now that we are a couple of months removed from the, initial stay-at-home orders, things are, I don't want to say getting back to normal, but the local governments are trying to be able to conduct business for the first time in months. And that means that in several jurisdictions around the country, the Second Amendment sanctuary movement is popping back up again. We're going to get to that momentarily, but right now, President Trump has a huge announcement for his top supporters. He'll be celebrating the 2020 Republican National Convention this summer, and he wants you to enter for your chance to join him at the convention. If you win, the team will cover the flight and hotel and give you VIP passes for yourself and a guest. All you have to do is text ENGAGE to 88022 today for your chance to meet President Trump at the convention. Again, that's ENGAGE to 88022 to enter to win this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be his special guest, paid for by Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated. So I just happened to notice a number of stories from around the country, really all over the country, dealing with Second Amendment sanctuary resolutions just over the past couple of days. And most of the news is good, although maybe not as good as it could be. Let's start with Anderson County, South Carolina, where a Second Amendment sanctuary ordinance, not a resolution, but an ordinance, was passed on Tuesday, 5-1 vote there in Anderson County, South Carolina. It's believed that Anderson County is the first county in the state of South Carolina to adopt such a measure. According to the Independent Mail, the ordinance says that county funds and resources will not be used to enforce any state or federal laws that the Anderson County Sheriff deems to be an infringement on the right to keep and bear firearms, firearm accessories, and ammunition. So this is very similar to ordinances we have seen around the country, or resolutions, I should say. But again, resolutions don't have the force of law. Ordinances do. And so with this change, the Anderson County Board of Supervisors has basically given the green light to the local sheriff there, saying, listen, use your discretion. If you think that one of these gun laws violates the constitutional rights of our residents, it's up to you to use your discretion as to whether or not you want to enforce that. Now, again, a lot of these resolutions that we've seen around the country, including many in the state of Virginia, have also talked about not using funds to enact or to enforce gun control laws that are deemed unconstitutional. But some politicians have, tried to wiggle around this, and they've said, well, but if the Supreme Court, doesn't weigh in, if the Supreme Court doesn't take a case and deem a gun control law unconstitutional, well, then maybe that means that it's constitutional, so we'd have to go ahead and enforce it. According to the Independent Mail, there have been concerns about whether the sheriff could legally make this choice there in Anderson County, South Carolina. I think he'd be very hard-pressed to sue a sheriff over the sheriff's office using the discretion that they are afforded by law in terms of what cases to prosecute. If the sheriff doesn't feel like, it's a priority for the office to enforce a, quote-unquote universal background check law or even a so-called assault weapons ban, what do you do about that? Because every day law enforcement uses discretion. If you're, driving down the road, perfect example, driving this morning doing about 62 and a 55, and a police officer up behind me. Lights are flashing. I go to pull over, and blows right by me because he's on his way somewhere else. Now, I was speeding. It was a 55, but that officer had somewhere else he needed to be, somewhere more important than pulling me over and giving me a ticket for going 7 miles an hour over the speed limit. Again, officers use this discretion every day that they are on the job. So how on earth you could sue a law enforcement officer for using that discretion, I confess it's kind of beyond me. So that's the news out of Anderson County, South Carolina, where an ordinance has been passed. And that's good news. In New Albany, Pennsylvania, the Floyd County commissioners met this week. They approved a resolution, and one that was a little watered down, according to the local press, titled the Constitutional Assurance Resolution. The measure recognizes a, quote, higher authority and the commissioner's inability to supersede existing laws and hierarchy while supporting the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, as well as state and national laws. This from the News and Tribune. There are some Second Amendment supporters there in Floyd County, Indiana, who are a little miffed that the measure was watered down. One of them is Tim Kamer. He's a commissioner there in Floyd County, sponsored the resolution. And he said, we only have so much authority in the state of Indiana. All three of us, meaning the commissioners, heavily support the Second Amendment and all of the other amendments. All right. Marty Schindler is a resident of Floyd County, Indiana. He said it's, quote, way watered down from what I submitted to him. He said, I'll submit it to the state group and they'll make the final decision if they consider it enough to say that Floyd County supports the Second Amendment to use it for, a state run, he said, or for the state run. He said, if not, I guess we'll give it another run to see what we can do. He's talking about a group called Indiana 2A. And basically they want to try to get enough local support for a Second Amendment sanctuary, a resolution to get the state to declare itself a Second Amendment sanctuary, which I got to say, I think Indiana's pretty close in spirit, if not in name already. Then you've got Minnesota. And Minnesota's already seen a couple of counties adopt Second Amendment sanctuary resolutions, but one county's been debating this for months now. And they finally went ahead, again, with some changes. The Crow Wing County Board unanimously passing a resolution back on June 23rd. Again, not quite the language. Did not include a section stating that the county would use any means at its disposal, including legal action, appropriate public funds, and directing law enforcement and county employees to avoid enforcing laws that it deems to be unconstitutional. That's the sort of wiggle room that we're seeing here from some of these politicians who say, well, listen, yeah, I support the Second Amendment, but you know what? I don't want to get involved in this. I don't want to put the county in a position where all of a sudden we're now deciding whether or not we're going to enforce these laws. Again, I would just remind these county supervisors of what we have seen across the nation over the past couple of months. We had mayors and police chiefs in major cities like Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, say, we're not going to enforce certain laws. We're not going to go out and respond to burglary calls. We're not going to go out and arrest drug dealers. We're not going to enforce these laws. At the time, they said it's because of coronavirus concerns, right? Want to make sure that, the jails aren't full. Want to make sure that we don't spread the coronavirus for those folks who are being held awaiting trial, or for those who've been convicted of their crimes but have yet to be transferred to prison. But we saw communities say, in the name of public safety, we're not going to enforce some of these laws. So if that attitude, and by the way, none of those statements that I'm aware of challenged legally. So no judge, smacked down Philadelphia, for instance, said, what are you doing? You're crazy. You got to enforce every law that's on the book. So if the major cities can do this with all kinds of laws that they deem to be inconvenient, then why on earth can a Second Amendment sanctuary not do the same thing? I really do believe that it's time for folks to put, some teeth behind some of these resolutions. If they truly do believe that the Second Amendment is worth standing up for, then stand up for it. But don't, engage in these sort of half measures. We also have a resolution that has been on the books for months and months that is maybe going to be delayed again. This news from, I believe, Shawano County in Wisconsin, where they were supposed to hold a vote, I guess, a couple of months ago on a Second Amendment sanctuary resolution. Now it's been put off till July, but the county chairman says he's not even sure they're going to have a board meeting in July. Yeah, says there's not a lot of business to discuss, although apparently there in Shawana County, there's been a lot of interest in terms of the Second Amendment sanctuary resolution. So this may be a case of, county commissioners just hoping to kick the can down the road, and then maybe gun owners will forget about it and it'll go away. It's not going to go away. If you're a politician out there and you're hoping, well, maybe I can just avoid the topic for a few months, this is not going to go away. In fact, I think as we get closer to Election Day in November and the prospect of Joe Biden's gun control plans becoming more of a reality, you are going to see a renewed fervor for Second Amendment sanctuaries. And again, already we've got hundreds of them around the United States, but I think we will likely see hundreds more if it looks like Joe Biden is going to win in November. And if he does win in November, then expect just an explosion of Second Amendment sanctuaries to pop up around the country. So you might as well do it now. You might as well not wait. But again, they're in Shawana County, Wisconsin. I guess they're just, thinking they can maybe wait this one out, and gun owners will lose interest or forget about what is going on. Again, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that the Second Amendment sanctuary movement is real. I think that it is growing. I think that the fact that we have, again, these record high number of gun sales over the past few months, millions of new gun owners. I don't think any of those new gun owners purchased their firearm planning it to be a short-term rental. Do you? I mean, yeah, I bought this gun and I spent hundreds of dollars on it, but, if they ban it a few months from now, I'm okay with that too. I don't think that you would find too many gun owners who hold that position. And again, given what we have seen now, not just from, Joe Biden at the federal level, but this absurd continued push for gun control, even as some of the same politicians call for defunding the police. Again, I don't think that the Second Amendment sanctuary movement is going away. I was talking earlier today with Tony Katz from WIBC in Indianapolis, Indiana. We're talking about Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot and her statement earlier this week that, crime's up in Chicago, but the reason why she says crime is up in Chicago is because of the gun laws in Indiana. And she said, these criminals in Chicago, man, they can just drive over the border into Indiana. They can go and stock up on military-grade weapons, as many of them as they want, without a background check. And then they come back to Chicago and they just cause mayhem on the streets. So the answer, according to Lori Lightfoot, is either more gun control laws in Indiana or more federal gun control laws, when in reality, the number one source state for firearms that are recovered in Illinois and then traced by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the number one state where those traced firearms originated from in Illinois is not Indiana. It's not Texas. It's not Virginia. It's not Mississippi. It's Illinois. That's it. So Mayor Lightfoot can blame Indiana gun laws all she wants, but Illinois criminals are primarily getting their guns in Illinois. And how are they primarily doing this? Through theft, through the black market, through family and friends, through straw purchases. And you can, try to pass a law that is aimed at preventing straw purchases, that is aimed at cracking down on illegal gun possession. But unfortunately, what we've seen is that gun control advocates are far more interested in passing legislation that's aimed at legal law-abiding gun owners. We just had a half dozen laws get put on the books in the state of Virginia, and not one of them aimed at people who illegally possess a firearm or use a firearm in the commission of a crime. Each and every one of these proposals that are now law in the state of Virginia restrict the lawful exercise of the right to keep and bear arms. Things that were legal in June are illegal in the month of July. All right, before we get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our armed citizen story of the day, President Trump has a huge announcement for his top supporters. He's celebrating the 2020 Republican National Convention this summer, and he wants you to enter for your chance to join him at the convention. If you win, the team will cover the flight, hotel, give you VIP passes for yourself and a guest. All you have to do is text ENGAGE to 88022 today for your chance to meet President Trump at the convention. Again, that is ENGAGE to 88022 to enter to win this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be his special guest, paid for by Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated. All right, so let's move on to our armed citizen story, our recidivist report, our good deed of the day. We will start with our recidivist report, story out of Kentucky. Now, listen, this headline, not much to this headline, doesn't really tell the whole story. Eddyville man shot and killed in Princeton, Kentucky. And again, you kind of got to do a little bit of digging in the story to find out that the suspect in this case should not have been out on the street to begin with. According to Kentucky State Police, 24-year-old James Bannister shot with a handgun by 47-year-old Joe Curl. There in Princeton, Kentucky, it was about 7:30 Friday night. Colonel, according to state police, located at his home about 5 hours after the shooting. He was arrested early Saturday morning, charged with murder, possession of a handgun by a convicted felon, as well as tampering with physical evidence. According to authorities, Colonel is a registered sex offender, convicted in 2012 of third-degree rape of a 15-year-old. And then in November of 2018, he was, in February of 2017, he was arrested for possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. All right. If this case had been referred to federal court, Colonel could have faced 10 years in prison. Instead, this was adjudicated locally, and he was sentenced to a year in jail for being a felon in possession of a firearm. That happened in November of 2018. But he didn't do a year behind bars, because in January of 2019, Colonel was released on shock probation. Yeah. And he was back out on the streets. So he did 2 months for being a felon in possession of a firearm, when again, under federal law, he could have done 10 years behind bars. And now, a year and a half later, now he's facing first-degree murder charges in addition to another felon in possession charge. Our armed citizen story of the day from the Yellow Springs News in Yellow Springs, Ohio, where prosecutors say that a double shooting looks to be a case of self-defense. And apparently a grand jury has come to the same conclusion here. According to the local newspaper, evidence not previously released publicly, among materials that they say led investigators to believe that 59-year-old Cheryl Sanders and her husband, Robert Sanders, had driven to Ohio from their home in North Carolina with the intention of killing Cheryl Sanders' ex-husband, a guy named Robert Duncan, and Duncan's new wife, Molly, at their home there in Greene County. Greene County prosecutor Stephen Holler said in a phone interview last week, quote, they had a checklist. A handwritten note, investigators say they found the couple's vehicle detailing their intentions. Piece of a lined notebook paper. Be prepared prior to leaving for Y.S. Under that, in all uppercase letters is written, quote, objective, cause pain for Lindsay. Primary, kill him. Secondary, burn house down. Third, kill him/her. A couple of lines down, it's written, have alibi. Make sure Cheryl is out of danger / ability to drive back to Asheville. According to multiple 911 calls, including a call from Molly Duncan, the shooting started around 11 o'clock on February the 12th. Cedarville police first to arrive on scene, followed by other local authorities. When they got there, Cheryl Sanders was lying in the Duncan's driveway. Reed Sanders was on the ground across the road. Medics unable to resuscitate the pair. The coroner was called. According to investigators, the pair pulled into this gated driveway shortly after 11 o'clock in the morning. The couple who were the targets of this attack pulled back into their home around 11 o'clock in the morning. They'd gone out for coffee. Molly Duncan was driving. Her husband was in the passenger seat. Husband said he got out of the vehicle for check for mail in their mailbox. And then a guy wearing a camouflage mask approached Molly's side of the car with a gun. According to the transcript of the interview that was conducted by authorities, Lindsay said he owns a gun but had left it in his home earlier, so he asked Molly if her gun was in the car. Both of these individuals are concealed carry holders, and they said that they actually obtained their concealed carry license because of their fear that Cheryl Sanders wanted to do them harm. They obtained the concealed carry license about 4 years ago when they moved to the area. Molly did, by the way, have her gun, and she gave it to her husband. Lindsay said he exchanged fire with the man later identified as Reed Sanders. Lindsay said his ex-wife then pulled up in a vehicle, got out, also threatened them with a gun before she, too, was shot by Duncan. Greene County coroner said back in February that the apparent cause of death for the Sanders' multiple gunshot wounds, the Duncans not physically hurt in that altercation. And again, now both the prosecutor and a grand jury in this case concluding that this was self-defense. A very scary situation. And again, one of these stories that has all of the elements to be a big national news story, right? I mean, think about this. You got, a couple that drive from their home in North Carolina to Ohio in order to kill the woman's ex-husband and his new wife. And instead, the ex-husband and his new wife are armed and they defend themselves and they shoot and kill their attackers. I mean, that's a story. And yet, I don't even know if this is going to get covered outside of Yellow Springs, Ohio. I don't even know if the Columbus Dispatch or the Cincinnati Enquirer or the Cleveland Plain Dealer is going to bother with this story. It's again, the anti-gun media bias. I've written about it, wrote about it quite a bit yesterday at bearingarms.com. It is real, and it is not going away. All right, finally today, our good deed of the day. Take a look at this. Clarkstown police officer Paul Munden saving a drowning girl over the weekend. This from the Rockland Report in New York State. This was at a birthday party. And the little girl's name is Ella, by the way. Her mom, Carly Schaefer, said it was every parent's worst fear, but thankfully a very happy ending. Yesterday, while attending a friend's daughter's birthday party, Ella went in the pool. She went on wedding cake stairs, Mom said, and promised not to leave the shallow area. She never ever leaves the ladder, even in a puddle jumper flotation device. She's petrified of the water. Until she did leave the area. She saw a beautiful, shiny doll in the pool, dove towards the middle of it alone in water she couldn't stand in, and she couldn't swim. Mom quickly realized what was going on. She didn't even know that she was in the pool, but she said, I knew. She said, my heart was in my stomach as I was running to her, watching her bob up and down in the water, choking. She said, a man I briefly met 5 minutes prior had made it to her first. She was taken in water and surely would have drowned. He dove in, fully dressed, shoes and all, over the side of the pool for a kid he didn't even know. A kid he's not related to. A kid he's never met. He saved my kid's life, and I have no idea how to ever thank this man. This man is Paul Munden, and he is a Clarkstown police officer, a hero. So in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing, even if it means getting a little wet. Paul Munden there in New York State. We thank you, sir, for your very, very good deed. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program. Tomorrow on the program, we're going to talk with Tim Schmidt from the U.S. Concealed Carry Association, talking about the record high number of gun sales, as well as some friendly tips that you might be able to offer some of your new gun owner friends about what to do if you're carrying for self-defense. When can you draw your firearm? When should you not draw your firearm so that you don't end up in trouble or maybe making local news headlines like we saw with that woman in Michigan last week? So be sure to tune in for that. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your Hump Day Wednesday. Thank you again for being a part of the program. Don't forget you can subscribe to Town Hall Media at YouTube or Bearing Arms Cam & Company on Apple Podcasts or any of your other finer podcast platforms. That way you never miss a program. We will be back tomorrow, but until then, be well, be safe, be free, and we'll see you soon with another edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company.